Ethan Blackwood was the husband I personally chose from the orphanage. 2 decades later, he became a heartless betrayer. A wolf in sheep's clothing. Secretly plotting to seize my family's entire inheritance. The Miller estate. He even used that very fortune to propose to Aurora Hayes, who had grown up with him in the orphanage. I died consumed by resentment. However, when I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day my parents and I first visited the orphanage. My mother's poor health meant that when I was 6, my parents took me to the city's largest orphanage to choose someone to adopt. I dozed off in the back seat, vaguely overhearing their quiet conversation. My father advised my mother to consider my opinion when the time came. He explained that as a daughter, bearing the family's legacy alone in the future would be incredibly difficult. Therefore, they intended to adopt a boy of good character, raise him alongside me, and provide him with the same rigorous upbringing. Once grown, he would marry me and, as my husband, help manage the family business. Being so young, I didn't truly grasp the meaning of husband. Yet, I knew my father was my mother's husband. He loved her deeply, and she depended almost entirely on him. In my naive understanding then, a husband must be an incredibly important person in one's life. My decision to choose Ethan was amusingly naive. A dramatic story filled with romantic clichés. He had rescued me after I accidentally fell into the water, waking up from near drowning. The first thing I saw was his youthful, handsome, and somewhat kind face. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a soft glow upon him. At 6, I understood neither love nor even basic emotions. I just felt my heart pounding rapidly. Only later in life did I learn that feeling was merely the suspension bridge effect. This physiological arousal could be completely manipulated. The suspension bridge effect is a psychological phenomenon where one misinterprets the fear, rapid heartbeat, and excitement from a dangerous experience as attraction or love for someone nearby. Nevertheless, I adamantly insisted my parents adopt him. 8-year-old Ethan Blackwood stood out among most orphanage children. His delicate features and fair skin were almost flawless. Dressed in donated, worn clothes, he stood before everyone and obediently promised to protect me for life and grow up with me. Yet, 2 decades later, he became a heartless fiend, coveting my family's wealth and ruthlessly betraying me. He engineered a car accident, leaving my parents in a coma, then used discounted debts to force me out of our home. Loan sharks seized me, and I lost 3 fingers. At that point, I couldn't even afford hospital care. While he flaunted our family's entire estate and assets, he ostentatiously held a proposal ceremony for Aurora Hayes, the very girl who had grown up with him in the orphanage. I don't recall how I died. After 2 decades of luxury, I met my end like a frightened mouse huddled in a dark corner. I was acutely aware that, facing such a fate, death might actually be a form of release for me. At that time, I was utterly incapable of confronting Ethan Blackwood or disrupting the elaborate plan he had secretly orchestrated over 2 decades. Cruel reality isn't like the movies. The situation couldn't be reversed overnight. He had meticulously planned every step to render me useless. From childhood, he had managed and cared for everything in my life, making me accustomed to relying on men. Without his support or anyone to back me, I was merely a weed in the dirt, easily trampled by anyone. My fall from heaven to hell happened in a single night, and even in death, the hatred in my heart burned fiercely. Chloe Miller, your parents need to speak with the director for a moment. Do you want to come along? No. The dazzling sunlight made me squint slightly, and I pointed towards a nearby slide. My father shook his head resignedly. Be careful, okay? Rest assured, Mr. Miller, we have many children here, and all play equipment is thoroughly inspected. Young Chloe is so lovely, the other children will certainly look after her. The director said with a fawning smile. My father nodded, put an arm around my mother's waist, and left with the director. Watching them walk away, I could no longer stay calm, my entire body trembled. This wasn't a hallucination before death. The hatred in my heart confirmed that it was all real. Heaven had finally granted me another chance. I followed the familiar path from my previous life towards the orphanage pond. In my past life, curious about the apricot-colored lotuses blooming in the middle of the pond, I had slipped and fallen into the water. As water filled my lungs and I could barely breathe, a small pair of hands, exerting all their strength, pulled me out. From that moment, my 2 decades of deceit began. During my final days, I regretted it countless times. I would rather die in this shallow pond than drag my loving parents down and let our assets fall into someone else's hands. A gentle breeze swept by, rippling the water's surface, and a few apricot-colored lotus flowers swayed softly. I stood there waiting, anticipating the encounter Ethan Blackwood had deliberately arranged, waiting for him to reenact his clever charade from my previous life. This time, I absolutely would not let him play the hero saving the damsel. Nor would I give him any chance to impress my parents. Splash! A sudden force from behind shoved me into the pond, and an immediate fear of water overwhelmed me. I couldn't swim, and as pond water filled my mouth and nose, I couldn't even cry for help. How could this be? My memory clearly stated I had slipped and fallen. It was happening. I gradually ceased struggling, and my body slowly sank. Just then, a familiar pull, identical to my previous life's experience, unexpectedly emerged. "Little sister, wake up. Are you all right?" The familiar voice made my hand, hidden beneath my dress, clench tightly. I opened my eyes. The scene before me was exactly as it had been in my past life. "Little girl, you're finally awake." The boy let out a relieved breath and smiled. "Don't go near the pond so carelessly again. I won't always be here to save you." With that, he familiarly ruffled my hair. A wave of disgust surged within me. I instinctively recoiled. "Did you save me?" No, something was off about his clothes. I had relied too heavily on my past life's memory. Then, I was only 6 and had just suffered a near-drowning experience. In my panic, my mind had overlooked many details. Ethan Blackwood's clothes only had a few splashes of water, and even his hair was dry. If he had genuinely gone into the water to save me, how could that be possible? Did I truly just slip in my previous life? Who, then, had pushed me just now? Of course. His youthful face briefly froze, his lie almost visibly written across it. "They saw you fall in but were afraid of being scolded by the director. So they all ran away." He quickly added, "Only I, even knowing I might get yelled at, ran to save you." I slowly sat up, my gaze, filled with a knowing smile, fixed on him. "Thank you for saving me. Without you, I might never have seen my parents again." Ethan Blackwood secretly let out a sigh of relief. "No need to thank me. I often help other children." He flashed a radiant smile. "Little sister, you should go find your parents now. I have to go too." A hint of loneliness showed in his eyes. "The director just told us to gather. A couple is here to adopt a child. I wonder if they'll choose me this time. I really want to go to school, to read books, but there's no opportunity here." I gently patted his shoulder, my voice full of conviction. "Don't worry, big brother. You're so kind. They're sure to choose you." "Really?" Watching his eyes light up with hope, an inexpressible sense of satisfaction swelled within me. "Ethan Blackwood, try a taste of your plans crumbling, falling straight from heaven to hell. Although this pain isn't even a fraction of what I endured, we have plenty of time, don't we?" Ethan Blackwood skipped away cheerfully, eager to curry favor with my parents. He hadn't saved me. In fact, he might well have been the one who pushed me into the water. Yet, in my previous life, he had brazenly taken credit for someone else's heroic act, comfortably enjoying my family's wealth and resources for 2 decades. I stood up, carefully scanning my surroundings. Next to the pond was a patch of overgrown weeds, tall enough to reach an adult's calves. Amidst the buzzing of cicadas, the scorching sun shone down on a boy lying in the tall grass. He looked frail, his face pale, and his entire body was soaked, making him appear even more disheveled. I gently lifted his face, which was tilted to one side. My pupils suddenly constricted, and an inexplicable sense of familiarity rose within me. My first encounter with Julian Vance in my past life was when I was 18. During a suffocatingly hot summer. That year, after returning from a graduation trip abroad with Ethan Blackwood and resting for half a month, he suggested we drive to a suburban villa for a pool party with friends. Unfortunately, halfway there, a tire blew out. We haphazardly chose a roadside repair shop. That day, the sun blazed, not a breeze stirred, and the air felt utterly still. The sports car's body was scorching to the touch. Julian Vance wore a grease-stained tank top. Under the sun, his wheat-colored arms revealed clear muscle definition. It was a tough, laborious job. He was taciturn, focused only on removing the tire. 10 minutes later, he walked towards us, where we sat in the shade. In a cool, dry voice, he stated, "My tire repair materials are just standard. Do you still want the repair?" "No problem. Just fix it. It's only a car anyway." Ethan Blackwood replied casually, his gaze at Julian Vance tinged with a hint of superiority. By the way, how have you been these past few years? Julian Vance didn't respond, he simply turned and resumed his work. I didn't understand what Ethan Blackwood was implying, but I didn't press for details. The repair took a while, and even in the shade, the heat was uncomfortable. I went to a nearby convenience stall and bought 3 bottles of iced water. After handing one to Ethan Blackwood, I intended to offer the other to the mechanic. I truly didn't understand how he could endure such stifling heat all day. Beneath the brim of his cap, his face was dotted with sweat. Just as I was about to approach, Ethan Blackwood suddenly grabbed my wrist, pulling me back. I looked at him, surprised. What's wrong? Chloe, don't go near him. He's very dirty. Hearing that, my face immediately flushed. I lowered my voice, feeling a bit embarrassed. Why would you say that? What if the mechanic hears you? Ethan Blackwood chuckled nonchalantly. It's fine, he can't hear. He pointed to his ear. His right ear is deaf, and his left ear only has partial hearing. I gently pursed my lips, an indescribable pang of sorrow rising within me. How do you know? Ethan Blackwood paused, then said. He used to be in the same orphanage as me. Ethan Blackwood always felt insecure about his orphanage background. Seeing the fleeting loneliness in his eyes at that moment, I immediately changed the subject, afraid of upsetting him. That bottle of water was never given. The second, and last, time I saw Julian Vance was after Ethan Blackwood had used me as collateral for a massive debt. 10 years later, that taciturn roadside mechanic had become a rising figure in the business world. Thanks to the gaming company he founded, I was pursued and beaten by loan sharks, losing 3 fingers, yet couldn't afford a hospital. He threw a bank card at me. His cold eyes showed no trace of emotion. A moment later, he simply uttered 2 words. Blind one. Clutching the bank card with my intact hand, I walked alone into a deserted alley and broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I hadn't cried when I discovered Ethan Blackwood's true nature. I hadn't cried when I was driven from my home, realizing the chasm between my status and that of my enemy. Even when I lost my fingers, I only shed a few involuntary tears. Even witnessing Ethan Blackwood use my family's assets as a dowry to propose to another woman. Only hatred remained in my heart. But as I was repeatedly pushed into dead ends, immense suffering enveloped me. This cruel indifference had caused my downfall. I used the money on the card to pay all of my parents' medical expenses. Before I could even consider what to do with the rest, I had departed this world. There was a slight regret. When I received that money, I had sworn I would repay it. Julian Vance, I am truly grateful to you. And so, the debt from my previous life, I will repay it manifold in this one. Mr. Miller, all the children from Haven House Orphanage are here. You and Mrs. Miller can talk to them. They are all very well-behaved and sensible young ones. The director enthusiastically introduced them from beside us. My mother nodded, then turned to my father. Honey, should we call Chloe over to look too? No sooner had she spoken than I quickly walked over to my mother's side. My soaking wet dress and hair immediately drew everyone's attention. What happened to you? What's going on? I clutched my mother's skirt, attempting to feign childish distress. But I was no longer a 6-year-old girl. My features tried to contort into a childlike pout a few times, but ultimately gave up. I lowered my gaze, my voice tinged with grievance. Someone pushed me into the pond. What? My mother exclaimed in horror, immediately taking me to change into dry clothes. When I returned, the director was bowing repeatedly in apology, while my father sat sternly to the side. Back then, surveillance cameras were not yet widespread, let alone in a small orphanage reliant on social funding. Thus, regardless of whether I was truly pushed or merely lied, the director could only humbly accept blame. After all, my family wasn't just here simply to adopt, due to my mother's benevolence. Our family had been the orphanage's largest benefactor for years. Miss Chloe has changed her clothes. Let Director Auntie see if you're hurt. The director affectionately took my hand, praising. Your new dress is so pretty. And your hair is tied in an adorable ponytail. Mrs. Miller has such skillful hands. Huh, little sister? Before the director could continue her flattering remarks, Ethan Blackwood, who had been quiet, joyfully spoke up. The director unconsciously furrowed her brow. She disliked children who didn't understand manners. And especially disliked being interrupted. I'm the big brother who just saved you. Do you remember me? The director's expression suddenly brightened as she turned to Ethan. You mean you just saved this little girl? Yes, I saw her in the pond. And no one else was around. Worried she might be in trouble, I ran to rescue her. Luckily, the pond wasn't too deep. And I checked us both when we got out. We're both unharmed. Ethan Blackwood spoke with confident certainty, his eyes brimming with naive sincerity. The director's smile deepened. Ethan is truly a good child, eager to do good deeds, she said, taking Ethan Blackwood's hand and leading him before us. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, this is Ethan Blackwood. He's a good child, healthy and quite outstanding among the orphanage children. And most importantly, he has a very kind heart. I had planned to particularly recommend him to you too. But unexpectedly, without me even speaking, he and Chloe already share a special connection. My mother observed him for a moment, nodding slightly with satisfaction. My father, who had been seated, suddenly spoke up. You said you went into the water to save my daughter. So why aren't you wet at all? Ethan Blackwood's small body stiffened, and he fumbled for words. Mr. Miller, the director interjected. This boy is lightly dressed, and it's scorching hot outside. Standing in the sun, he would dry quickly, not to mention how long he's been standing here already. My father cast a cold glance, his voice impatient. Are you sure it was him? Director, mother, I remember Ethan was the last one to arrive, and he was a bit late. I looked towards the sound. A rather timid-looking girl in a dress spoke up from the crowd. That's right, I went back to the dorm to change into clean clothes, which weren't much different from before, and also used a towel to dry my hair a bit. That's why I was late. Ethan Blackwood suddenly mustered his courage and stood tall. You can just ask her. After I pulled her out, she woke up. I even talked with her, and she said I was very kind and would definitely be adopted this time. Little sister Chloe, do you remember? Ethan Blackwood suddenly looked at me, his eyes filled with desperate earnestness, as if clinging to the last straw to change his destiny. How could I possibly disappoint him? I nodded, leaning close to my father. The director was overjoyed. Ethan Blackwood also quietly let out a sigh of relief. Such a beautiful little sister. How could I let her get hurt? Little sister, don't worry, I will protect you well from now on. Hearing these words, my mother smiled gently and nodded, and my father's expression seemed uncontradictory. Chloe, would you like this little friend to be your big brother from now on? My mother bent down to ask for my opinion. The room instantly became so quiet one could hear a pin drop. Everyone awaited my answer, the answer they expected. But no, I don't want a deceiver as my big brother. A significant buzz filled the air. My eyes remained locked on Ethan Blackwood, whose complexion visibly blanched. My father, with a hint of curiosity, leaned down to question me. Why do you claim that? He wasn't the one who rescued you. When I fell, I didn't lose consciousness right away. I managed to open my eyes briefly and saw someone else pull me out. A boy completely different from him. I gestured pointedly at Ethan. What's more, I've already located the true rescuer in the bushes nearby. He passed out from the sheer exhaustion of saving me. His name is Julian Vance. Julian Vance is the one who saved me. I proclaimed the truth loudly and clearly, making sure everyone within earshot heard it. While I may have been brought up innocently in my previous life, I was far from a complete imbecile. Not an imbecile who grasped nothing. Ethan Blackwood's actions, in an orphanage where survival of the fittest was the norm, would undoubtedly lead to his isolation. And I specifically aimed to make him uneasy. This wasn't even about revenge. Merely a justified consequence for him. Julian Vance, director, didn't you state that all the children would be present? My father challenged the director, his voice low. Oh, well, she equivocated, clearly flustered. Mr. Richard Miller, that boy might not fit your adoption requirements. He has a minor disability. His family background is quite poor, and he's very withdrawn. He's been with us for years and hasn't formed any friendships. But I like him, I interjected, displeased, stopping the director from speaking further, and wriggled out of my father's embrace. I know he can't hear out of one ear, but my family has resources. We can pay for his treatment. Being introverted isn't a flaw, it signifies maturity, steadiness, self-restraint, and integrity, far superior to deceit. I played the role of a 6-year-old with a fierce hatred for injustice. Noticing my escalating anger, my father gently pulled me closer. Where did you pick up such phrases? A child your age discussing maturity and steadiness. Julian Vance is simply superior to him. I only want Julian Vance as my older brother. Nobody else will do. I pivoted my head. At this point, Ethan Blackwood, taking one final chance, tried to persuade me, his eyes bloodshot. Chloe, dear, I only lied because I care about you so much. By the time I arrived, you had already been pulled out of the water, so I didn't have an opportunity to save you. But I truly promised to protect you like a real big brother. From the bottom of my heart. I gave him a quick look. Really? Or will you backstab me and safeguard my inheritance? Enough. The director cut Ethan Blackwood off sharply. Go play with the other kids for now. We'll call you if anything comes up. Ethan Blackwood, visibly displeased, lowered his head and walked away, glancing back repeatedly, his eyes brimming with disappointment. His discontent stemmed from a single misstep, regretting how close he had been to fundamentally altering his life. That day, my father deliberated for a considerable time before ultimately deciding to postpone any adoption plans. My mother, already frail, was further worn down by the trauma of my accident, leading to increased mental exhaustion. Previously, she had grudgingly considered Ethan Blackwood, but this incident ignited strong suspicions within her. She was resolute in her refusal to bring anyone with dubious intentions into our home. Regarding Julian Vance, though she hadn't met him, the mere mention of disabled and frail was sufficient to make her waver. There was no way for me to inform my mother that, in the future, the notions of frail or weak would be entirely unrelated to Julian Vance. His perceived disability was simply a protective shell, shielding him from the jealousy that would inevitably arise when he reached positions of immense power. However, I found myself in agreement with this turn of events. My sole desire in this lifetime was to seize control. I proposed to my father that we host a modest gathering to express our gratitude to Julian Vance. This would also facilitate his ear treatment, enhance his quality of life, and grant him access to superior educational opportunities. For my father, these were trivial matters, yet, for Julian Vance, they represented a significant shortcut, allowing him to bypass numerous hardships. Once the orphanage staff realized our family held Julian Vance in high regard, they no longer dared to casually mistreat him. As we departed, the director and several children stood at the gate, waving goodbye. Through the car window, I observed Ethan Blackwood, his eyes visibly red and puffy, clearly having been crying. Beside him stood a little girl with a downcast expression. At the very edge of the group, Julian Vance stood alone and quietly, yet his gaze was directly fixed on me. It felt as though it would be a very long time indeed before I would confide in anyone about my reincarnation. I was simply utilizing my 26-year-old soul within this child's body. Meticulously refining myself, I relentlessly pushed myself to become stronger, robust enough to guarantee that the misfortunes of my previous existence would never reoccur. I harbored a fear of what's called fate, of circumstances that appeared to be preordained. That summer, upon my return from the orphanage, my immediate priority was to learn swimming. I resolved not to be frail, nor to ever falter again. I pursued my studies with an almost fanatical zeal, relentlessly pushing myself from beginning to end. My trajectory in this life diverged entirely from my former existence. I was no longer the guileless, innocent girl. My father's gaze, in turn, began to reflect growing approval. He no longer harbored the notion that a daughter like me was incapable of managing our substantial family enterprise. My mother, however, attributed my shift to the stress induced by the adoption incident. This only heightened her distress, and she refrained from mentioning the topic again. I commenced the clandestine development of my own strategies and spheres of influence. Beyond the profound hatred, most recollections of my previous world were hazy. I found myself needing to almost entirely restart everything. I engaged a private detective to discreetly monitor the orphanage's affairs, receiving periodic updates. Concurrently, I cunningly employed minor gestures to ensure Ethan endured a less than pleasant time during his years there. I was certain our paths would cross again. On that destined day, my true vengeance would commence. At the age of 18, I forsook the romantic artistic aspirations that had consumed me in my former life. Instead, gaining admission to the nation's top university, specializing in business administration, Ethan Blackwood's Aurora Hayes, Maya, became my dormitory roommate. On our first day of classes, she appeared in a plain white dress and offered to help me carry my surprisingly light suitcase into our room. She offered a genuinely innocent smile. "Hi there, I'm Maya Adams. Studying education. We're roommates now. I hope we can all get along well. I observed her. Her face was adorably sweet and pristine. The quintessential, first love, look that easily captivated men. That unsuspecting smile, in particular, made it incredibly hard for anyone not to feel warmly towards her. Though I pondered if her appearance reflected her true nature or if a sweet facade concealed a darker heart. Hello, I'm Chloe Miller, a business administration major, I responded with a polite smile, maintaining a balance between warmth and reserve, as I was certain Maya Adams would cling to me. Chloe Miller, would you mind if I called you Chloe? It feels friendlier. Chloe, your bed is number 2. By the window, with excellent light. Let me help you set your luggage here. Chloe, I'm sure I'm not the first to tell you how stunning you are. Am I? When you opened the door, my eyes literally sparkled. Oh, Chloe, your bag is gorgeous. Your taste is impeccable. She fixated on my handbag, her eyes gleaming, compliments flowing effortlessly, with a zealousness that was almost overwhelming, a solicitousness that bordered on uncomfortable. The other 2 roommates exchanged discreet eye rolls, their faces etched with bewilderment. Earlier, when Maya Adams had been with them, she had shown none of this syrupy enthusiasm. It was as if she were a different person. I discreetly took everything in. After offering brief greetings to the other 2, I set my handbag on the table. Maya Adams continued to linger intimately beside me, her presence markedly potent. I gestured towards the bag. You like it, don't you? She jolted as if roused from a trance, then nodded vigorously. I love this bag. It must be incredibly pricey, right? She gnawed on her lip, her hands twisting her skirt, completely unashamed of her self-consciousness. I don't have money, so I couldn't possibly own such a fine bag. Her eyes dropped, and she adopted a delicate posture. A man, at this point, would likely have melted and offered her anything. I was no different. I removed my personal belongings from the bag. Once I confirmed it was empty, I casually extended the bag to Maya Adams. It's yours, I smiled, if you'd like it. Maya Adams's eyes instantly gleamed. This particular bag, purchased in a boutique, retailed for at least $80,000. And even with funds, it wasn't readily available. Pre-ordering was often necessary. It was, to a certain extent, a status symbol. Presenting it to someone else might catch them off guard. Most people would typically decline. Yet, $80,000 was a substantial amount for Maya Adams. A girl raised in an orphanage. What would her choice be? I was genuinely eager to find out. Maya Adams drew a quiet breath just before her fingertips brushed the handbag. Her expression showed clear indecision. But in the end, she yielded to her true inclination. I don't mind it at all. I really don't. Oh, Chloe, you're so generous. As long as you like it. That's what matters. I then perfunctorily retrieved 2 more gift packages from my luggage, handing them to the other 2 roommates. My mother prepared these. I'm not very adept at social graces, but she hopes we can all coexist harmoniously for the next 4 years. The 2 roommates, previously absorbed in their own tasks, quickly rose, cast a glance at the gifts, and hastily waved their hands. Oh, no need, really, they're too extravagant. They offered awkward smiles, secretly drawing comparisons between me and Maya Adams. One, who professed ignorance of social conduct, was nonetheless exceptionally thoughtful, even hinting at the naive generosity of the wealthy. The other, outwardly pure and innocuous, harbored a secret love for status. Seeing their refusal, it wasn't I who grew impatient, but Maya Adams. She perceived their rejection as a pretense of virtue that, in fact, served to highlight her own materialistic desires. Maya Adams, inwardly displeased, bit her lip and moved closer. I'm the only one accepting Chloe's gift. This is quite awkward. How about this then? She abruptly suggested, since this is our first meeting. Once everyone is settled, I'd like to treat you all to dinner. Without waiting for our reply, she stated firmly, don't even think about declining. Or I won't feel right accepting Chloe's handbag either. Beneath the sycamore tree beside the dormitory, a man in a crisp white shirt waited. His canvas shoes were lightly dusted, and his towering frame, with a prominent nose and gold-rimmed glasses, served as the ultimate weapon for enchanting the hearts of young women gathered below the girls' dorm. I descended the stairs with them. As we crossed a pedestrian walkway, Maya Adams joyfully extended her arm, waving to Ethan Blackwood across the way. My gaze, too, followed hers towards the man. I parted my lips in a smile. Ethan Blackwood, it's been a while. The game officially begins. Are you ready? Chloe, I brought a friend along. Do you mind? Maya Adams turned to solicit my opinion. Over the last few hours, she had practically worshipped me, leaving the other two roommates bewildered. They failed to grasp that in an orphanage, where the strong preyed on the weak, one always sought to appease those who could offer advantages. I also wondered when Ethan Blackwood and Maya Adams would decide to make me their target. 12 years prior, the day I left the orphanage had solidified into their life's ultimate objective. Zoe, Stella, do either of you mind? Having been overlooked, their expressions showed mild annoyance, yet they shook their heads to indicate it was fine. I replied to Maya Adams, I don't believe any of us mind. Maya Adams gave an awkward nod, forcing a wry smile. In that case, let's head over. She led the charge towards Ethan Blackwood, her white skirt billowing, her face radiant like a blossoming flower. Let me introduce you. This is my older brother, Ethan Blackwood, who I grew up with. He's 2 years our senior, currently a third-year student, and also our school's student council president. Brother Ethan, these three are my roommates. Zoe and Stella are architecture majors, and Chloe is in economics and management. As she spoke, a barely perceptible air of smug pride settled on her features. I slightly lowered my head to conceal the derision in my eyes. Economics and management, Ethan Blackwood spoke, his voice clear and resonant, causing the other two roommates to blush slightly as they looked at him. So, a junior from my department. Feel free to reach out if you ever need help. He curled his lips into a sunny smile, extending his hand in my direction. Abruptly, his smile faltered. Wait, Junior, have we met previously? He appeared to be sifting through his recollections, but after a brief pause, a realization dawned on him, and his smile broadened. You're Chloe, the little girl. Maya Adams also pretended to be stunned for a moment, then exclaimed about the wonderful coincidence, but she deliberately avoided revealing her orphanage origins in front of others, thus remaining vague. A bewildered expression crossed my face as I asked, confused, have we met before? Noting my apparent lack of recollection regarding our childhood encounter, Ethan Blackwood said with what seemed like deep, nostalgic affection, yes, we have. Maya Adams selected a casual family restaurant near the university. Ethan Blackwood surveyed the area, then assiduously used napkins to wipe down everyone's chairs and the tabletop. He glanced at me, a hint of apology in his voice. I imagine you might not be entirely comfortable in this setting, but after a good wipe, it won't be dirty. Zoe and Stella, observing his actions, found him less intimidating. Maya Adams struggled to suppress a smile, her eyes fixed on Ethan Blackwood's back, a mix of hurt and resentment evident. Like the others, I looked at him with a grateful gaze, quietly stating, it's perfectly fine. Ethan Blackwood naturally settled beside me, helping me rinse my bowl and chopsticks with hot water. He even politely used chopsticks to serve me dishes I couldn't easily reach. His meticulous attentiveness was akin to a boyfriend's, yet certain nuances carefully maintained a platonic boundary, making it hard for observers to feel he was overstepping. Zoe and Stella's eyes, however, were filled with playful insinuation as they deliberately remarked, Blackwood, you're not trying to win Chloe over, are you? I instinctively shot a glance at Maya Adams across the table. She remained unreactive, continuing to eat placidly, though the hand gripping her chopsticks was stark white from the force. What remarkable composure. Ethan Blackwood let out a soft chuckle. I nearly became Chloe's older brother once, but circumstances conspired, and I missed that opportunity. Who could have foreseen that fate would reunite us? I instinctively care for her like a younger sister, hoping to compensate for past regrets. Oh, their eyes widened in surprise. No wonder Maya mentioned it felt like destiny. So that's the story. Stella abruptly teased. Well, that's truly a profound twist of fate. I suggest you skip the brother role and go straight for being Chloe's boyfriend. Wait, isn't Senior Blackwood Maya's boyfriend? I always assumed you two were an item. No, both quickly denied it in unison. Ethan Blackwood quietly clarified, you've got it wrong. Maya is someone I grew up with since childhood. She's essentially like my younger sister to me. I set my chopsticks down, my brow furrowing slightly. Only now, hearing your words, do I recall who you are. When I was small, my parents brought me to the orphanage, hoping to adopt a child. You falsely claimed to be the one who rescued me from the water. Didn't you? You wanted to usurp the other boys' credit and earn my parents' gratitude, hoping they would adopt you instead. My words, precise and cutting, offered no quarter. Maya Adams, hearing me unveil his true identity before everyone, turned a shade paler and lowered her head, concealing the resentment simmering in her eyes. What was truly unexpected, however, was Ethan Blackwood's utter indifference. He spoke with a wry tone. Indeed, I've owed you an apology for a very long time. That year, I arrived too late to save you personally. But I desperately wanted the chance to be your older brother. I was just a child then. Which is why I made such a regrettable error. He shook his head, self-deprecatingly. It was one misstep that led to many. Nevertheless, if given another chance, I would still act exactly as I did back then. I lowered my gaze and took a sip of the restaurant's inferior tea, masking the derision that flickered in my eyes. Since when did falsely claiming another's merit become merely not wanting to miss an opportunity? Dusk descended. After finding an excuse to part ways with that opportunistic duo, I headed to a suburban office building with a bento box, familiar with the route, and pressed the elevator button for the 4th floor. At this hour, the only light remaining was from a single office. Pushing open the door, I found Julian Vance resting his weary head on his desk, his hearing aid removed. I sighed helplessly. Attending classes all day and working all night. He truly allowed himself no respite. I placed the bento box before him. He then took the cue to conclude his work, affixed his hearing aid to his right ear, and, as was his habit, took my hand, gently kneading my fingertips. You're here, shall we eat together? He inquired. I shook my head, declining, and settled into a nearby seat, reviewing the project management plan my father had entrusted to me. Today, on the first day of school, I encountered the person who tried to claim your heroism at the orphanage when we were children. Julian Vance paused in thought. Who was that? Such incidents were common at the orphanage. I observed him calmly eating his meal, seemingly unfazed by the childhood isolation and the theft of his credit. For some reason, a sudden, stifling sensation swelled in my chest. I always perceived Julian Vance as living a life of hardship. As a child, a family tragedy cost him hearing in one ear, followed by social exclusion and bullying at the orphanage, spearheaded by Ethan Blackwood. At 17, he left the orphanage, embarking on a relentless journey of academic and professional striving. He appeared never to have truly lived for his own joy or contentment. I temporarily set aside the plan, intending to provoke a reaction from him. It was Ethan Blackwood. His hand holding the chopsticks froze. In my memory, he was almost exactly as he had been when he was a child. Well, his personality seemed quite lively and enthusiastic. He even invited us out to dinner, saying he wanted to apologize for past events. It was Julian Vance. A ripple of emotion stirred in Ethan's eyes, as if 1,000 thoughts were intertwining. He remained silent for a few seconds before slowly saying, I remember him very clearly. He set down his chopsticks, having only eaten a few bites. Then he stood and walked over to me, his voice growing serious. He's not a good person. If you truly want to associate with him, you need to be careful. Having said this, he sat down decisively beside me. His gaze lowered, his whole body as still as a wooden statue. I chuckled softly, reaching out to gently nudge his arm. Do you know why I remember what he looked like as a child so clearly? He pulled back the arm I had touched, making it clear he didn't want to continue the conversation. I don't want to know. With that, he even pulled down the hearing aid on his right ear, unmistakably signaling his displeasure to me. His ear had been damaged from childhood due to domestic violence. In my previous life, I asked my father to help him get treatment. So in this life, his left ear was perfectly normal. Only his right ear, due to prolonged damage, retained about 30% of its hearing. He was sitting to my left. Reluctantly, I leaned closer, almost whispering into his ear. Because he hurt you, and he tried to steal your credit. That's why I remember him so well. I don't like people who have hurt you. And I certainly don't like those who stabbed me in the back. That's precisely what happened that year. If no one had interfered, Ethan wouldn't have been separated from Chloe. He also wouldn't have suffered for so many years, nor endured such a bad reputation for so long. In truth, he could have developed much better. But his current outcome is also quite good. Those two were always fated to be together. I stood outside the dorm room door, listening as Maya Adams twisted the truth, recounting the events of that year to our two other roommates. I calmly pushed the door open and stepped inside. Chloe, you're back? Maya Adams immediately stood up to greet me, her smile radiant. We were just discussing whether we should take a stroll around campus. After all, we don't have many classes tomorrow. A look of expectation gleamed in her eyes. You should come with us too. I feigned consideration for a few seconds before shaking my head. No, I have something to do tomorrow. Good things couldn't be rushed. I had already played along with their act today, so I'd let them stew in anticipation for a few more days. The next morning, I hastily tidied up a bit, my gaze sweeping over a few branded jewelry items on my desk. A faint smile touched my eyes. That little mouse. I wonder if she can control herself. Just as I stepped out of the girls' dorm, I saw Ethan Blackwood approaching me. He held up a breakfast bag in his hand, a gentle, warm smile on his face. You haven't had breakfast yet, have you? I naturally didn't accept it, only looking behind him. Huh? Maya Adams was still in the dorm. Not yet out. He knew. He smiled and said, I prepared it for you. Chloe, this might sound a bit abrupt, but I want to pursue you. I missed my chance before, but fate has brought us together again. This time, I want to seize it. His gaze was resolute, and even his posture was perfectly straight. Even though it was early morning, there were quite a few people passing by the girls' dorm. Some stopped to watch, others covered their mouths, trying to suppress their excitement as they eavesdropped. Blackwood was indeed very abrupt. I pressed my lips together, my expression indifferent. If I'm not mistaken, we just reconnected yesterday, didn't we? Less than 12 hours, and you've already decided to pursue someone? Not 12 hours. Ethan Blackwood shook his head. It's 12 years. Chloe, you've always been an obsession in my heart. From the first time I saw you at 5 or 6 years old. I had a very strong desire to protect you. I don't know when that feeling changed. I know it will be hard for you to accept immediately, but I won't give up. Just turn around, and I'll always be standing behind you. He spoke such heartfelt words. I struggled to suppress the rising nausea. I'm sorry, I'm not used to eating these kinds of things in the morning. If you still want to persist, next time, please change it to coffee and a croissant. Seeing the crowd growing larger, I turned and left first. Currently, I don't want to appear on Campus Confessions and become famous. After all, the first person to be featured on Campus Confessions and become the center of gossip should be someone else. This little mouse, Maya Adams, truly lived up to my expectations. Because the four of us in the dorm had different majors. Except for Zoe and Stella, who could attend classes together. Our schedules varied greatly. This gave Maya Adams many opportunities to borrow my things. For the first month, she had shown admiration and covetousness. But after that, she became increasingly dissatisfied with the paltry few items I bestowed upon her. In a photo, she stood under a green tree, smiling casually, a diamond necklace on her neck sparkling brilliantly under the sun. It was a beautiful picture. But apart from the photograph itself, the most glaringly vulgar object within it could bring someone ruin. Not a bad shot, I said casually from inside the car to the person on the other end of the line. It's still not enough. 1 or 2 acts of theft aren't enough to warrant a serious charge. I don't like the feeling of futile effort. Only a fatal blow counts as success. You can't blame me for being overly cautious. Everything in my previous life taught me the meaning of lying dormant. I've also learned quite a lot from my father in the decade or so since I've been reborn. This society loves to moralize, despises the rich, and sympathizes with the weak. If I were to publicly release photos of Maya Adams stealing my things right now, it would indeed bring her a lot of public scorn. But human memory is limited. Such a small mistake wouldn't make her a pariah. After a brief public uproar, she could simply do a few things to gain public favor and still become an innocent snowflake. But this is not what I wanted to see, even if she was just someone implicated because of my revenge on Duan Qifeng. Watching the summer rain suddenly fall outside the window, blurring the glass, I sat in the car seat, exceptionally calm. In truth, from the very beginning, I hadn't intended to seek revenge on Maya Adams, even though I knew in my past life she and Ethan Blackwood had conspired early on. I only wanted to punish her in this life by making her watch Ethan Blackwood, whom she considered superior and took such pride in, be utterly crushed by me. I had given her so many chances, but she was too greedy. So greedy that she told me her relationship with Ethan Blackwood in the previous life wasn't love. It wasn't Ethan Blackwood forcing her, but her greed for my family's assets. Just like him, stealing my things, using my identity to flirt with others, even constantly reporting my whereabouts to Duan Qifeng. One thing after another. If I were merciful, I would appear to be a saint. I suddenly laughed, my expression mocking. Unfortunately, I played the saint enough in my previous life. I won't do it even a little bit in this life. To achieve great things, one must first remain calm. This was a principle my father taught me, and I always adhered to it. The summer rain arrived fiercely and left just as quickly. Seeing the rain subside, I took my umbrella and stepped out of the car. Ethan Blackwood, appearing from who knew where, was rushing towards me, looking utterly disheveled. He was completely drenched, and even his glasses were covered in raindrops. He came right up beside me, and I feigned a startled jump. But how could a hunter fear her prey? I had been waiting for him for a long time. Blackwood, why are you here? Ethan Blackwood wiped the rainwater from his face, explaining with a slightly helpless, doting tone, you've missed a few classes recently, and as your suitor, I know a driver drops you off here daily. I had originally intended to wait for you here, but I didn't anticipate such heavy rain. It was then that I, startled, to remember he was still standing in the rain. I offered him my umbrella and asked, with feigned puzzlement, didn't my father inform the school? I've been busy working on a project he assigned me, so my schedule is a bit packed. The school curriculum will be covered by a professional tutor later. Ethan Blackwood stopped, looking tired, and began to speak with a hint of awkwardness. Actually, it's because I haven't seen you in a while. This is my first time pursuing a girl, and I don't know how to do it, but not being able to meet you makes me feel a bit discouraged. Chloe, I don't expect you to accept my advances right away, but could you give me an opportunity to be part of your world? Ah, how humble and earnest, how persistently he struggled. In my previous life, Ethan enjoyed my family's financial resources and connections, and his entire ambition was to seize those assets for himself. The only thing that caused him sorrow was using his orphanage origins as leverage. Thus, he was eager to stand in a high position, casually discussing Julian Vance's impoverished life, scorning him as dirty, and secretly pleased and curious. Why didn't he eat minced meat? Implying Julian was too low to deserve it. But now, for his own benefit, he was doing despicable things, deviating from his path. I truly wanted to return to the previous life and slap him across the face when he despised Julian Vance. Blackwood, I truly didn't expect you to be so earnest. My face showed